Welcome, everyone. My name is Jennifer Wetham, and I am a faculty developer at the State Board. And today I have the distinct pleasure of introducing Lucas Myers to all of you. He is tenured biology faculty at Lower Columbia College, and he has been teaching online biology and other STEM courses for a very, very long time. I'm going to let him tell you a little bit about his education because it's very impressive. Um, but before he does that, I just wanted to say I've also had the pleasure of working with Lucas when the State Board partnered with the Institute for Systems Biology to just help faculty think about how to integrate a systems approach to teaching bio in their courses and also use big data. And Lucas was one of our faculty leaders. And I learned so much from working with him, and I'm just really excited to have the opportunity to learn from him again today. Lucas, do you mind saying a few words of introduction, especially about your continuing education?
Sure. Yeah, I've been at LCC since around 2010, and I've worked on a variety of different classes there, and started in face to face, and then we moved biology online in like 2000. Probably some of them a little earlier than that, but right around 2012, 2013, which I'm going to actually show one of my 2013 courses today, just to kind of give an idea of like if this is your first time going online, this is might be what it looks like, and that's okay. And so we'll kind of take a little trip back to 2013, and which I'm sure a lot of us would be okay with today, and take a look at that. But in terms of my own education, I got a couple graduate degrees in public health, um, which is good and bad in this day and age, and then anatomy, physiology, and some distance ed work within that. My master's in anatomy physiology had a whole kind of distance ed and education side to it through it was actually sponsored by HAPS, which is the kind of the National Human Anatomy Physiology Society that looks at education for undergraduate AP. So
Hey,
a lot of
Lucas,
work
I'm so
there.
sorry. Just one thing really quickly. Do you mind? We're just getting a couple comments in the chat that people are having a little trouble hearing you.
Hearing me? Okay, let me take a look here. Make sure my stuff's turned up here. I'll try to speak really loud too to make sure it picks up.
Thank you so much. And if folks, if you're still having trouble hearing, just type into the chat. Lucas, I'm sorry to interrupt. Keep going.
No, you're fine. No, I was just speaking on the fact that I've had a lot of work around undergraduate education in my master's degrees and in the doctoral degree that I've started, and specifically looking at kind of science education and the distance ed part of that as well. So a lot of my background has been in that, and it worked out really well because it coincided with my own development of online courses and how I looked at student learning in sciences, and as those sciences went online for sure. So it's been a journey for my own self, and I got to do it without being told to do it and without the situations we're in. So I understand the anxieties and the pressure that we're in right now as we look to move online. So my hope today is that I can show you a variety of ways, from very simple to more complex, to move science courses online, as well as talk about some of the things that people were texting in, such as assessments and labs online, because I know in the sciences, that's kind of the area people, look at when they go online is how do we maintain rigor in exams? How do we maintain exams? How do we do wet labs? All those things while having an online class that we can feel that we can attach our name to. I think that's the biggest thing as teachers is we want to put our name on something that is good, that has the same standards we would have in class. And I completely understand that anxiety, having been doing this for 6 to 8 years and constantly trying to make sure that what I put out there is worthy of having the college's name on it, higher education's name on it, and my own. So understand that I empathize with that as we go through today's conversation.
Lucas, thank you so much. And to those of you who have just joined us, thank you so much. We have about 56 people in the room right now, which is really exciting.
Awesome.
And yeah, and I just wanted to say, as Lucas has a lot of things to show you today because he has several courses designed. All of these courses will be available in the Canvas Commons, and in the follow-up, I'll be sending folks an email with sort of a list of follow-up resources. So I just have two requests. The first one is to type any and all questions into the chat, and just know that I'm going to put them on hold until Lucas has finished presenting. But Lucas and I are going to go back and look at all the questions, and Lucas and I will both answer them to the best of our ability, and that will be available to you after. I think in yesterday's session, there were a lot of people, like some people had tech questions, like how do I do a discussion board in Canvas, and other people had more conceptual theoretical questions. So I think if you could just type all of those in, then we can make sure that Lucas and I follow up and get you your answers. And then the other thing, what did I want to ask? Oh, and the other thing is too, is if you would like to be contacted after this webinar, please type your email into the chat now. And Lucas, I'm stopping to talk and it's your turn.
Sounds good. And if anybody wants to contact me, they are welcome to do so, and we'll make sure that. I mean, you can always find my email and stuff, but I'm happy to, in this day and age, share my cell phone, whatever, to make sure that people get the help they need. Doesn't mean I'll be available all the time, but I will do my best to help anybody that has questions, whatever it may be. Sometimes it's easier just to get a quick answer than try to find it online for a while. So feel free to contact me for this, and I'm sure if we see some overwhelming themes consistently on the chat box there, I'm sure Jen will enlighten me, and we can address those if possible during this, so that we're not just talking about something nobody is getting answers from. So what I want to
Absolutely.
do real briefly though is just kind of, and then a lot of you may have heard this or have gone through this, but I just want to go through the basics, because I think that's where anytime we're dealing with stressful situations, anytime we're doing something new, the fundamentals, the basics, and you'll kind of hear the coaching side of me. I coach basketball at the college as well, so you'll see that part of me come out. But I think anytime we are dealing with these situations, you got to go back to the basics, and that's the best way to get started. If you try to jump into complexities, the overwhelming nature of it will kind of put barriers up. And so it's really simple just to get going on the beginning stuff. Well, how do I start? How do I get a course going? What does it need to look like from the get-go to help students? Because oftentimes the biggest roadblocks are the first week for a student in an online class. And if the information isn't kind of planned out well, if the introduction into the course isn't planned out well, you can lose a lot of students, or they get way behind. And so I think having the beginning, the simple foundation is really important for student learning. And that's something I try to look at when I'm doing these online courses. Yes, I have a standard and expectation I want to hold, especially teaching human anatomy and physiology, but I've also taught cell biology, or really it's general biology for the state system. Biology 160 is our pre-nursing, pre-anatomy, physiology, biology class. And so I've taught that online as well. And so I always try to make sure that I look at these courses through the lens of my student. What are they going to see when they log in? What are their main issues? What do they struggle with? Where do they get confused? And after doing this since 2013, 2012, I I still get some, but I've seen most of the issues to the point where I don't get 200 emails in the first week trying to figure things out. It runs pretty smoothly. And that's not because I've developed anything special. It's because I've done it for 7 years. And after 7 years, you find all the bugs. So don't think that when I'm doing this that I have done anything special other than just had more experience than maybe some of you, or maybe not. Some of you may have ideas from me as well. So just hopefully we can have that kind of dialogue as we move forward, even past today. So the first thing I want to talk about is one, the kind of the anxieties of putting it online, and understanding that there's always concerns around rigor and putting a science class online, and how do we maintain all those things. I would try to get yourself to throw that out for now. Just, and it's a normal dialogue to have in your head and with colleagues, but just throw the whole concern about rigor, especially with the situation we're in, out the door for now, and you'll come back to it, and we'll come back to it today. Um, Try to set that aside, and that's something you can continue to work on. It's no different than the first time you taught a face-to-face class. The only thing that saves us in a face-to-face class a lot of times is if we think that if a test is hard, we've made it rigorous. And online, it feels different. So I think that we need to set that conversation aside and focus on kind of what we can do to start the online class, and then we can come back to rigor and tests and online labs and some of those things. So what I want to look at is course setup. And you can look at a lot of different ways to set up a course. You can look at a lot of different ways to introduce a student to a course. And what I like to do is always have an introduction page. So the first day they log in, and I might change it a couple weeks in, we'll talk about that later. But the first day they log in, they have some sort of intro page. And I'll show you a few here from different courses. This is my biology 242. So it's the second quarter of anatomy that we run. And this is the intro page for this. This looks different because most of these students have had my 241 class, and I've also had a biology 160 class on Canvas, and most of them have had taken them online already because we have all three online. So a lot of our students go 160 online, 241 online, 242 online. And so by this point, they have a pretty good idea of what these classes are like. So I don't necessarily have to make my intro as robust as you'll see my biology 160 class. So I'll show you an example of that in a minute. But some of the key things to have are make sure you have images of yourself, contact information, and you can say, well, that's in the syllabus. Online, while you need to have your syllabus the way you need to have that Word document syllabus for them to download, and there's a syllabus tab and all these things. Your syllabus basically can design a whole course. So the information in your syllabus is going to be found throughout the entire course in multiple ways. And you really have to think about that. How do I make the syllabus a living environment in my course? How do I put all that information readily accessible in their pathway versus having students try to find it? You want to have basically a path that they're following, and the information they need is along that path in terms of navigating your course. I think that's one of the most helpful ways to look at it. If they're trying to do a scavenger hunt in your class, not that, and I'm not referring to like an intro activity, but if taking a class is like doing a scavenger hunt, that's going to make them more unsuccessful than the content itself. So we want to make sure we really lay out the information we have. And so you want to make sure you have that contact information. I like to throw a picture in there. This is my oldest son, just because it makes them feel like there's a human there, right? Creates that connection, that community part of the class. That's really important. They, and I try not to overwhelm them with the picture, but I throw a little picture on there. There's different things you can do on the intro page. This one has like course and etiquette, talks about how to work in online classes, prerequisites, technical skills, tips for online learning, announcements, talks about the announcements, questions, and course content in the modules. This is a very basic intro page that I use for my second quarter of anatomy that I used this last quarter. But again, that's because all these students had my previous classes online and were very familiar with what we were doing. It may be different in a different situation. Okay, and I know I'm scrolling on this. These will all be available in Canvas Commons, so don't feel like you're like trying to write things down or take notes. I would wait, and you can download these and take a look at them. As well as I'll have public links. You can just go look at them publicly, so you don't have to worry about downloading them right away. Now, if we go back and look at a couple different courses, this is a general biology course, so biology 160. And you can see here their intro page is a video of me recorded in my office. Now, this may not be available. Everybody may not be able to put one of these together. But this video is the first thing they see when they log into this class, and it talks about the course. It gives them a
It looks like Lucas froze. Yes, we lost his audio.
And down
Lucas?
below it,
Oh,
you can,
Lucas, I'm so
yep.
sorry. This is Jen. So I apologize. We lost you for a minute.
Okay.
So if you could just press the 30-second rewind button on yourself. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, thank you. And also just there is a couple questions in the chat.
Yeah, for sure.
But I just wanted to remind people that we will be, if it's something that we can address in the moment, we will. But otherwise, I want to be able to keep Lucas going. So we will be answering your questions either at the end or through an online FAQ. Sorry, Lucas.
No, you're good. You're good. And I haven't even been looking at the chat since I was looking at my screen. So,
You did,
uh,
yeah, you're doing perfect.
what I was talking about the last 30 seconds was just the differences in home pages. So, intro pages. And so, what I have here is a biology 160 class versus before. If you were on here, you saw I had a biology 242 class. The biology 242 class is more nuts and bolts in terms of it's very simple because a lot of those students in my 242 online class have already taken 2 online classes at LCC. And so they're very familiar with the process and what they're going to see in those classes. This right here that I have on the screen is Biology 160 online. This is from fall of 2018. And you can see here I have a video that is introducing the entire course. So this is an example of something you can do to introduce the course is do a video and explain it. The other part below it I have here are, and you can use, if you know how to do coding, you can do this. It's actually not hard. I'm not a great coder, but I was able to figure this out. But I have buttons in here that take them to where they need to go. And I tell them with instructions above here that the first thing they need to do is click on this one, getting started with Canvas. And what that does, and hopefully it works and hasn't broken since I did it, since this was 2 years ago, is it takes them to a Canvas tutorial page that has them walk through step by step how to be successful and get ready to be successful in the quarter. And I think these are very productive and helpful for students because it makes them go look at things that they need to know. If you've never taught online, one of the things you're going to see students struggle with is they're going to go to the, especially if they're using their phone in this day and age, they're using that app on their phone all the time. And I've had plenty of students email me before the quarter and say, can I complete your online science class with my phone? That should be a red flag. Not because we shouldn't have courses that are accessible by phone, but there's just no way to be successful in an online class generally with your phone, especially in an online lab science class. So those are things that you should be ready for. And the problem is one, they can't do some of the stuff you're asking them to do on a phone, but two, they're going to go look at the to-do list. So if you're a student in Canvas, just like we have a to grade list, to-do list, when they pull up their app, they get a to-do list from everything in their courses. And a lot of students will not go into the course. They will literally just go to the to-do list. And the to-do list might just be assignments. And then they'll pull up an assignment and it won't have any of the information they need to complete the assignment, which we'll talk about this. And then they'll email you and say, oh, I don't know how to complete this assignment. And the problem is they've never looked at any of the course content. All they've done is looked at the to-do list. So that's something to note. If you're going to write anything down, write down the fact that students like to look at to-do lists. And if you're having a lot of students this quarter who have never taken online classes, they might resort to looking at to-do lists because they see something on their app that says to do and they go to that. And then they miss out on a ton of information they need to be successful on that assignment. And then you're going to get 30 emails and it becomes problematic. So that's something to take note of. How do we deal with that situation? Well, one way is we have a really good introductory course or introductory page that walks them through what they need to do. There's different ways of doing that. This course was much more robust. I'd been doing this course for almost 5 years. And so I had adapted it a ton. They had learning teams online where they were meeting online synchronously or asynchronously to work on projects. And I taught this class a lot around cancer. And so they were dealing with a lot of things around cancer and having to do projects in their online learning spaces. So this is a very robust course. So this isn't necessarily something you're going to be able to put together in 2 weeks. I put this whole course together over the course of a few years in making changes every year. So, but this intro page is something you can definitely do to help students get into your course and be ready to go. Especially, I think, in a science course where online, where maybe there's really good content you need them to see to be successful on assignments. You want to make sure they're working through areas. And so you can see here I have just a basic list of things they have to do. Okay. And later on, you can go back through and look at all those. I'll have this again online published so you can look at the links and see the
Hey,
work.
Lucas.
Yep.
There is a question about, there's a couple of questions, a theme around team Canvas space.
Yeah.
One person specifically would just like to know if the professor assigns team Canvas space, and someone else just said, I'm curious, could you expand?
Yeah, for sure. So you can create teams on Canvas or you can let students do it. I don't let students do it online because it's a disaster. And I don't say that because the students can't do it. It's because if you let students do it, you're asking them to log into Canvas, figure it out, go into the tab where they need to go, and self-select themselves into teams. And we know that that's just, you would know online that that just wouldn't work well. So you actually get to set it up as a teacher yourself, and we can send that out. Jen and I can put together some of those things to send out how to put together teams. It's actually really simple. You can choose the number of groups you want. You can choose how many people you want in each group, and then it automatically does it for you before the quarter even starts, as soon as students are enrolled in the Canvas space. And they don't get to see it until you publish the course. So, but it has it ready. And then in the team space itself, it's its own. So like if I go to team one, it's its own space where they can communicate with each other, again, synchronously or asynchronously, separate of the entire course, and separate of all other students. The teacher has access to every team space. So if you do things like this, it can get a little more time consuming, but it is really productive in terms of doing like team case studies, team projects, um, a variety of those things. Now you run into all the same stuff you run into with teams. And so that's a whole nother presentation and conversation than today, around that. But it's a great tool to utilize to create community online. It's one of the tools. And I'll show you another way to utilize that here in a little bit in my anatomy class, where we do medical case study discussions in team spaces in the course. That actually kind of eliminates some of those problems you see in teams while still gaining some of the benefits of having multiple people discuss around a topic and a problem. So no, that's a good question. The team spaces are awesome. You can still grade. You can grade it the same. You can grade it within teams. It only work it increases is getting the team set up, and if you're going to monitor the pages, the team spaces, that adds work. If you're going to go into the team spaces and reply to people and those things, it adds some workload. But it's really good space to set up for people to ask questions to each other, develop study teams, and those things. I've seen a lot of people create uh, study groups that have lasted all the way through nursing program purely because they got put together in a online team in my biology 160 class. And then they all got into nursing school together and continue to work as a study team. So there are some long-term benefits from doing these things as well. But yeah, that's a great question around the team spaces.
Hey,
So,
Lucas, just one quick
yep,
question. So sorry, I just noticed that, like, I just heard you say that this is one tool for community and that there are a couple other tools for building community.
yep,
And I'm just wondering if people could post into the chat, would you be interested in a follow-up STEM specific session around, like Lucas, I just heard you say it could be a whole other session. So
yeah,
if people could type into the chat, if you're interested in a follow-up session around community, okay, I'm seeing it, just write it in the chat. Lucas, keep going.
yeah, no, definitely. That's a very robust one. I mean, there's a lot to it. So I would be glad to do that later on because it can be a little more complicated than the time we have today. And I want to make sure we focus on just course development today. So the so you just make sure you have an intro page, have your face, have your name, and then make sure you have some sort of walkthrough process for getting the students set up in the course and understanding what they need to do. And part of that is going to be making sure you have content, at least the first couple of weeks or week, set up in your modules. And so what does that look like in modules? And let's take a look at that. I'm going to go back to I'll do this one. So I'm going to show you various types today just to make sure you don't get overwhelmed by one or the other. Again, I've been doing this for 7 years. And so if I've been doing the same class for 6 or 7 years, I have way more experience in just changing it and adapting it and improving it along the way versus maybe putting up a new course this quarter. So this is my first quarter of biology, of anatomy, physiology online. And modules is where I keep all the content for them to work through. Now it might link to pages, it might link to all sorts of things, but I want everything in modules and I want it labeled to streamline the process for them in terms of their navigation. I don't want them to have to click on assignments one day, people the next day, quizzes the next day, syllabus the next day, all over here on the left-hand side, because that gets really overwhelming navigation-wise. As we all know, when we have to click through 30 different tabs to find something, we get irritated and we might quit doing it. So it's no different for a student who's already overwhelmed, maybe because they're having to go online this quarter. 2, because people are dying and we're dealing with a pandemic and there's stress all over the place. And 3, it's a tough class if you're teaching a class online. So it's already tough face to face. So there's all sorts of stress. So any way we can eliminate navigational barriers, that's one of the biggest things you can do when you're teaching online for a student. So you'll notice on the left-hand side, I have all of these with this kind of eye scratched out on the left-hand side. That means as a student, I wouldn't be able to see any of these. And if you need to know how to do that, we can kind of answer that in the question and answer page. It's part of the settings tab, but those are all not viewable to the students because I don't want them clicking on quizzes or assignments. I put all the assignments they need in the modules here. And again, that streamlines their pathway through the course. And so you'll notice here I have, again, a getting started module that walks them through what they need to do. This is where they learn about their textbook. And I don't know if you're teaching anatomy, physiology, or biology, and you're trying to figure out what to do for a textbook. OpenStax is a great one to use. Maybe you don't like OpenStax, but it's a great one to use for an online course, especially in this moment where you're stressing about textbooks maybe, and you're having to go online because it's free online. And they can buy a copy of it too. Our bookstore prints them with agreement with them, and we sell them for like $20 for 241 and 242, and they're printed copies. But online, it's free and viewable, and so it's a great resource and tool for teaching science classes. So if you're looking for something online, there's all sorts of them. You may not even need a textbook. There's videos. There's all sorts of resources. But this is where I would introduce them to all the things they need to do. I make sure and we'll talk about this, make sure they're introduced to their online lab software. We use Labster now for the last year or 2. Before that, we used Late Night Labs. I'll talk about that more in a few minutes because I know that there's all sorts of questions around virtual labs. And then I have them look at the exam proctoring because we still use a lot of exams, multiple choice exams, fill in the blank, essays, all those things in our online anatomy classes. And so we use a proctoring system called HonorLock, which honestly is fantastic. We've used a variety of them. When we first went online, I pushed to get us a proctoring system because we were having students come to campus in our online courses, and I told them that requiring them to come to campus really wasn't truly distance ed. And so we provided a alternative in ProctorU. We used ProctorU for a while. Now we use HonorLock. So I've seen a variety of types. I'll address that in a little bit. And then syllabus. So you can see here, it introduces them. And this page right here is the one I showed you earlier that walks them through everything they need to do to get ready. I have a questions module. This is where they can ask general questions. This syllabus discussion forum is actually part of their first day of assignments. They actually have to read the syllabus, go through the information, and post a question about it. Okay. This is a great spot to get rid of all those questions they're going to have about the syllabus. Multiple students will ask the same question or they'll answer each other's, and then you can go in there and answer them as well. It's a great tool. We have tutors that actually we add them to our course. I don't know if anybody else has done that, but our tutors are part of our courses, and so I haven't asked the tutor discussion forum. I generally don't go in there at all. I like to keep that as their opportunity to talk to someone other than the teacher. And so I tell the tutor if they have questions, they can reach out to me and I'll help them answer them. But that's the space for students to ask the tutor, and the tutor will have a time where they check those regularly. And it's been very productive for our online class to have that opportunity. It also ends up being a place where they end up making online appointments, those sort of things with that tutor. And then the raise your hand discussion, which I've seen it also called like question corner. Katrina Fuller is a colleague of mine who's fantastic and teaches microbiology online. She does what she calls question corner. So you can name it whatever you want, but it's a great discussion forum to ask questions. And what ends up happening, and this is another great tool for creating community, is that students who already know the answer will actually answer these for you. You'll go into the raise your hand discussion and find out that Karen's already answered Joe's question and it's perfect. And so then you can give it a thumbs up, or you can say, thanks, Karen, this is perfect. Yes, Joe, let me know if you have any more questions. And it's a great way to affirm some people who are looking ahead, knowing the information, and help those who need it. And it really creates that community. And so I find a lot of times I might, look at this discussion forum in the morning, and then when I go back in the afternoon, there's been new questions and students have answered it for me. And so it really kind of creates that classroom kind of teamwork environment. It's a great tool to have in your online class. It doesn't seem like much, but it's super productive, especially if you don't want 500 emails, which you're going to get a lot of emails teaching online. And so these are ways, and you can set it up to tell them, go here first. These are ways to mitigate having a full inbox. Now, again, streamlining the process, and you can set this up in a variety of ways. You could set it up in multiple weeks. You could set it up in days. The goal is set it up in a way that's comfortable for you and productive for students. Okay. You should never, and I always go back to this with coaching basketball, teach what you know, coach what you know. So do what you're comfortable with, do what you know, because people are smart enough to figure out when someone's doing something outside of their comfort zone that they know nothing about. So you want to make sure you do what you're comfortable with and stick to it. Now that might be like, oh, I'm not comfortable with any online learning. We get that. And a lot of your students won't be either, but you have a leg up on them. And the idea is do what you're comfortable with, because you'll be a better teacher in that. And then you can grow as you teach more in it or do more things. You can change and adapt, and you shouldn't just try to jump into what you might think is the best if you feel uncomfortable or you're not able to do it productively, because it'll end up hurting the students and hurting your teaching. So really stick to what you feel comfortable with, and just do the best at that this quarter, because that's what's going to be the most productive for you and your students. And so I have it set up here in weeks, and I've done it a variety of ways. So I'm going to show you week 1 here, and I'll show you another way I've done it. But I have it set up where I've put it in readings, video/lectures, and assignments and activities. I've done it in other ways where I basically have a sequence of things they need to do in perfect order. You could do it in either way, and I'll show you an example of that. But this one, I have the week 1 to 2 outline, which is like a study guide. But I really put on there, I try to label it out, not just study guide, but like what you need to know to be successful in this module. Like I really want them to be like, oh, I need to click on this because this tells me how to be successful. So I really try to make a lot of times, and not all these are perfect by any means, so don't think that I've done it with everything, but I really try to be purposeful in how I label things so that they understand what they're being asked to cover. And then I will put information from here, or like in the study guide, if I want them to look at characteristics of epithelial tissue, I'll make sure I mention that in the study guide so they know to go to that. And I make sure in my intro, I tell them I only put things in the modules that I want them to look at. You'll see on here under readings, it says, can you use this to study tissues in complete pre-lab 1? So I've told them this is a very important tool. You need to use it. It's attached to this assignment down here. So I try to really communicate in that way. Again, all of my weeks now are set up like this. I want to be consistent for the whole quarter and set it up in that way. So you got readings, you got videos and lectures, and you got assignments and activities, all with their due dates, with any notes or comments that they need to have. Okay, now on here you'll see homeostasis lab. Okay, that is a Labster lab that we use. I'll address Labster now, just since we're looking at these assignments and this organization of modules. Labster is the best tool we've used so far in our biology classes for virtual labs. And when I say the best tool, I'm referring to the best learning tool, the easiest for students to use, and the most effective in terms of cost. It's not super expensive for students. It's easy for us to put into our course, which saves us time and money, and it really helps them with learning. I've seen increased gains in their learning, in their participation. They enjoy them. They get to do them multiple times, and you can set up how you want to grade those. We've done it a variety of ways. We have graded labs just by what they complete on their quizzes at the end of their lab, and they can do it a couple times and you take the best score. We've also done it where they just get points for completing the labs, and then we have them turn in kind of reflective reports on each lab. And those reflective reports are what we grade more for the meat and the potatoes. And they actually have to go through some mindfulness type questions about what they learn, what was the process, what they do wrong. So there's a variety. They kind of have to go through that full loop learning process. And we like Lobster from the majority of us who have used it at Lower Columbia. There's been some concerns around some of them are too complex, which I agree. There are some very complex labs in there for a intro biology course. Some of them can be difficult sometimes to get through if you have tech issues, if your internet phases out, but that's going to be the issue with any virtual lab. We've used late night labs before Labster, and late night labs when it wasn't owned by Macmillan was really good. And then Macmillan bought it out and it became worse and worse. And I think they're having to redo them all now because it used an old Flash system for its simulations. And we moved to Labster. And the thing that I love about Labster is it is very student learning centered. It makes them go through the process. It makes them solve real world application type labs. If they do something wrong, they can't move forward. They have to figure out what they did wrong. So to me, it's a very productive learning process. Is it the same as doing a lab in class? No, it never will be. Even if you did at hands-on kits at home, it is not the same as doing it in lab. You're not with 15 other students. You're not with a teacher and a lab tech. You're not getting that constant over-the-shoulder help or eyes and kind of informative correction. So I think that it'll never be the same, but it doesn't mean it isn't good and productive. And I think for pre-nursing students, and this will be different for major students or whatever, for a lot of the pre-nursing, pre-dental hygiene students that we have, it meets their needs. And many times it does a better job than what we've done in class because it does things that really apply to their clinical setting at some point. It has great clinical applications. And most of our pre-nursing students are not necessarily going to be in a lab again at some point, but they're going to be with patients and they're going to have to think about real world critical thinking. And so these labs do a really good job on that, but that doesn't mean there isn't tech issues, that they can't be difficult at times. So you have to be willing to be flexible and adaptive as an instructor when using virtual labs, because you're going to run into problems and you're going to have to be willing to make those adjustments. But I will say Labster has been really helpful in setting courses up, which is super easy with Labster, but also dealing with problems. When our students email them, they get help. When I email them, I get help. Things get fixed, and they check in every quarter to meet with you. So I've been very pleased so far with Labster, but that doesn't mean it's perfect by any means. I think online labs are going to be tough no matter what. If we're doing hands-on kits, they're really expensive, and you're trusting that they're going to do it correctly at home, even if you've made a recording for them, right? We all know that we can teach something and then they don't do it correctly, and that's part of the learning process. And that's why I love Labster, because if they don't do it correctly, it tells them they have to fix it. They can't go forward. It does some good stuff. So if you have more questions on Lapster too, you can send those into the chat and we can answer those later. Because I know that the virtual labs is a difficult topic because we feel like it's not rigorous enough. Lobster is very rigorous in its own ways. I'll say that. Um, I think that it actually, you'll spend more time doing lobster online than you would in a wet lab on campus. And I love for like anatomy physiology, there's actually really good physiology labs that you wouldn't even necessarily be able to do on campus in your face-to-face class. My online students get better physiology labs than our face-to-face students. A lot of that has to do with Labster can create virtual equipment that's far better than any equipment we can get in campus. And so you can do some things there. Now, in terms of anatomy part, you're going to have to be more creative around studying the anatomy, doing pictures, images, virtual cadavers, all those things that can be productive. I plan on doing some new videos on our synthetic cadaver, our syndaver, and putting those up this quarter for students. So it's a work in progress. I like Lobster because it allows you to get something up that's good, that you can continue to build around or work on going forward versus trying to produce a bunch of stuff yourself or do hands-on kits. So I think if you can start with virtual labs, it's a good way to start. You can always go away from them and build your own after you see how things work and things that don't. I think if you start trying to build your own stuff, especially with only a couple weeks before the quarter starts, you're going to struggle more and it's going to be a little more difficult. And I'm not saying that to be an advocate for Lobster or anybody. I just, from my own experience, it's going to be easier to start with something that's been proven to do decent work and then adapt and change from that. Um, that's going to be a less stressful, more effective way, even though there'll be stress and frustration around using a virtual lab. So those are my thoughts on the virtual lab and specifically Labster. Now, you'll notice as we work down into the weeks here, we're going to get into, we have a variety of activities. Again, I'll share these so you can look at all the different types of activities we have. Maybe you'll have suggestions for me too. So look at them and you can email me and say, hey, Lucas, I don't like this assignment, but this would be a great way to do it. I'll put it in there right away. I'll say, sweet. So I'm always open for collaboration and changes. So if you have ideas for me, if you look through these courses, send them over. Because I would say my A&P courses are still really young online because I'm trying to add more physiology and lab stuff to them than we had in the past when we had them taught online. So
Hey, Lucas. So
yep,
there's a couple different questions showing up in the chat that I think, and I think what I'd like to do is just read a couple of them to you and then just have you say which ones you think are most useful to the large group right now.
perfect.
So I think there's some questions about Labster specifics in the sense of accessibility, like is Labster available or not available for students on their phones? And if so, like how do you address that? And then there's another question about if people are not using Labster and that's not an option, then what suggestions do you have in terms of designing online labs? And again, I think Katie wrote not specific sources, but what properties make an online lab good? And I'm just trying to think if of other folks who have been monitoring the chat, those are two kind of big themes that I'm seeing. Maybe also if you talked a little bit about how did Lower Columbia identify funding for this? I think a lot of schools are starting to look into Labster now and getting quoted prices.
Yeah,
How did you guys make the argument to fund this?
yeah. Well, yeah. So let me address all those because those are all notes I'd taken in earlier when we talked Gen 2 was we didn't start with Lobster when I started teaching anatomy physiology online. We had a great faculty member who's retired now who taught A&P online, and they had used a variety of systems, but never used any virtual labs. And so when I started teaching A&P online, I definitely had to just create activities, virtual labs, virtual activities for students to get some sort of lab experience, more than what had kind of been done in the past. A lot of things that had been done were basically look at images and then take a test on the images and make sure you knew the anatomy. Um, so basically a lot of like, for those who teach anatomy, physiology, or biology, basically it was like a bunch of lab practicals and that was their lab experience. And I felt like we were missing an opportunity to do things that would be helpful in their learning. And studying images and taking tests on images isn't necessarily the same as seeing um, a real cadaver, a real model, as well as seeing physiology processes. So we didn't use Labster in A&P. We used the late night labs in Biology 160 and microbiology. But what I did was I looked at how do I create, when I looked at these kind of the properties, as you spoke of, Jen, there of an assignment or a lab activity is, one, I want it to be more inquiry or investigative based. And so I wanted them to actually have to do some work um, that wasn't simply answering questions. And so I designed activities where they were having to look at anatomy and then the physiological processes as well. And so that might be like something with the kidney, and they're having to look at the anatomy of the kidney. They're having to look at the filtration and reabsorption processes, and then they're given different urine samples in a test or whatever, or they're given different situations. Maybe it's a blood pressure situation. They're just given different data or values, and they're having to work through that with questions and solve some things. And so, is it perfect? No, but it would be similar to what you might see in a lab situation. You might have real urine or fake urine in a lab situation, and they have to work through those things. But at least online, they're given the same process, and there's an inquiry part of it. There's an anatomical part of it. The physiological process is embedded in it. And I think that's a good way to start as well. Um, it doesn't have to be perfect, but it's a way to cover that material and get them in that same situation and get them going through that kind of inquiry learning process as well. And we did a lot of those, and I still have those in my class. I use those as assignments as well. Or I might have them complete that before they do a Labster lab. Or if Labster doesn't have a perfect lab for what I want, I might build an activity like that. And I know they weren't looking for specific sources, but there are tons of, if you just search online, and you can find them in my course actually, there's tons of online virtual activities you can find that will do a decent job at replacing a wet lab. And one of the best ones is Howard Hughes Medical Institute, HHMI. Uh, that's one of your best sites to look for stuff in biology. There's so many different videos and activities that go with that could be a supplement or a replacement for a wet lab. And you would get the same result, experience, and content out of it that you can in compared to a in-class wet lab. So that's what I would say about kind of addressing if you don't have Labster or you don't have late night labs. And again, if you email me, I'd be happy to share some of the ones I have with you, as well as you can look through these courses. But sometimes it's easier if I just send you that specific activity. So I'd be happy to share with them. Most of them are Google Docs, so you'd be able just to take it, steal it, adapt it, adjust it. If you make it better, just send it back. That's all I ask, so that I can benefit from that as well. Because if we got 56 people in this room, that's a lot of smart heads. And so there's a lot of great things to be gained from having that many people working on stuff. So,
And I'll just say too, right now we actually have 67, and I'm just
sweet.
about to post into the chat a link to this afternoon's specific focus on microbiology and labs. And also, I think what we would like to do is maybe Suzanne from North Seattle and a few other folks have started a Canvas shell, so that's specific to microbiology. And so I think we could put some of the things in there. So,
Yeah.
so everyone will be thinking about how to best share resources. But I did want to say that I think this afternoon's meeting, I'm very interested in having us form discipline-specific communities of practice. So like one for chemistry, one for microbiology, one for physics, etc. Because I think then we can start to really share information that's useful.
Yeah. No, that's great. I'll address here and then we can talk about assessments. I'll address the on our campus with Labster and late night labs. We kind of push the cost on the students because our textbooks are free or only $15. And so we push the cost a little bit onto our students, but we set it up in advance. And so in this situation, it might be a little different. But our dean and VP have been super supportive of what we do in our sciences. They know the benefit. They also see the benefit of just FTEs online. If our online classes are really good, our FTEs are going to be good. And our online classes are extremely full and usually have huge wait lists every quarter. And that's because we've put a lot of work into developing them, and students have that flexibility with an online class to continue to work in those things. And so those are ways you could talk about virtual labs with your administration to get them to maybe pony up some money for it. There's a lot of research out there from universities that have shown success with it, that have good data on it. We have data that show course success as well. It's not as teased out as well as some of those schools have, like Arizona State, Penn State. A lot of those universities have helped develop a lot of these virtual labs, and they did them because they didn't have enough space for a lot of their allied health pre-nursing students who needed these labs. And so they created these virtual labs for them, and they worked with Late Night Labs. They've worked with Lobster. So there's a lot of universities that have kind of pushed for this. And so you can use some of that data to help sway administration to find some money. And I'm sure Lobster, they're pretty easy to work with. I can't speak for them, but I'm sure they would be very flexible in creating some beneficial packages right now with what's going on. They've been very helpful, especially if it turns into a long-term partnership with them, that they would be helpful. They gave us some really good discounted costs when we started with them. And they did it based on the number of students we had, the number of labs we would be using. And then I just work with them every year to manage that and keep it at a low cost. In our biology 160 class, we use 12 labs, and it cost us like $48 per student, which is pretty reasonable compared to like a hands-on kit that's going to be $250 to $300 a person. So those are things to think about. We have it set up through our bookstore so they can use their financial aid. They get vouchers and codes. And then and we can have a whole nother conversation around this, and I can give you the information, but it's the easiest lab I've ever set up in a course. It is streamlined. It is super easy to set up in your Canvas space. They don't have to go anywhere else. They can stay right in Canvas and complete this. It'll pull up right in their Canvas shell, which I think is really important. The other thing we can talk about today, and I know I haven't got to all my Canvas spaces to show you, so I'll make sure I share all those so you can see different varieties. But the last thing is talking about exams. I've done exams in a variety of ways. I've done essay exams, which means I never have a break from grading. They're productive, but my brain, is gone after the end of the quarter. So sometimes it's about balance and figuring those things out. And so in these A&P courses, I might have more multiple choice, fill in the blank, sharing, or not sharing, but matching questions. You can do images with labeling. And I'll be honest, Canvas Commons is a lifesaver if you're trying to create quizzes. There are so many really good kind of foundations to start with on Canvas Commons for finding exams, and that way you don't have to rewrite a whole exam. You don't have to embed your own image and try to get a good image in there and label it. People have already done a lot of really good work out there, and they've shared it. So I suggest using Canvas Commons. I've done that a lot for my exams, because we all have time is precious to all of us. And so there's no point in spending 3 hours writing your own exam if you can find something very similar and then adapt it. And I get we all have our own egos and prides and things around what we're doing, and we think it's really good and we want it to be exactly the same as in class. But I'm just suggesting that you check out the quizzes and stuff on Commons and find one that works for you and adapt it. Or you're welcome to take mine and adapt them because they are, it's a very productive way to build your course. And then you can always go back and edit it when you have time and change it as you move forward. But when you're building a course, things that take robust amount of time are going to impair you from being a good teacher in the online class. And I think that's important to think about. Now, in terms of accountability online, because I know the concern with exams and online is, well, they're going to cheat. Students are going to cheat. I think that there's probably more worrisome around students cheating than actual cheating going on. And I don't know that online cheating is any worse than face-to-face cheating. If you're going to, look at it that way. If a student's cheating, they're going to find ways to cheat, whether they're online or face to face. And I think if you build a course the right way, um, it kind of derails a student from teaching or cheating. Students tend to cheat when things are stacked in a way where they have small amount of chances to be really successful in a class. So if my whole grade is based on 3 exams and I am concerned, that's going to lean me more towards finding a way to do really well in those exams that gives me an edge. And that's going to cause a person to maybe look at cheating. If they have a variety of ways to learn and build their learning and build their grade, they're going to they're going to rely less on some of those things that were the cheating resources. So in terms of an exam though, there are people that just time it and they don't provide proctoring. We do proctoring. We use HonorLock, which is amazing. It's $13 for the whole quarter. A student can pay $13. And again, we have the student pay. You can set it up through your institution to pay. We found it is okay to push these onto the student because our textbook costs are so low that it's still less than a lot of textbooks would cost. But it's $13. They can take as many exams as they want. And the great thing is, HonorLock isn't like, there isn't someone specifically staring at them the whole time. They have a logarithmic or algorithm, sorry. They have algorithms built into their system where they monitor all sorts of things. And so if a student looks down too many times at other places, someone will pop on and be like, hey, what's going on? They might have them scan their desk again. So HonorLock's a great tool. We've used ProctorU. ProctorU is ridiculously expensive. I found HonorLock's great, and students love HonorLock. And then you get a report about anything that seemed suspicious, and then you can go back and look. And it might be simply a person took their hat on and off like 30 times, and there might be nothing going on, but you can go back and look at that. When I've used HonorLock, I've had no problems. I don't have people cheating. From my own perspective, I give them notes. They can use a page of notes. And if you allow them to use a page of notes, that really derails cheating. And generally, students with notes don't, whether they have notes or not, has no bearing on their grade. It more has to do with the preparation before that anyways. And the notes just helps give them a little more comfort as they go to take the test, and there's less cheating. But HonorLock's a great way to do it if you're going to do assessments or exams and you're worried about proctoring online. Now, with Lapster and HonorLock, you have the technology and the internet issue that we're all going to face more even this quarter. Do students have access to good internet in a rural setting? Can they use their phone? No for both of those, I'm pretty sure. I don't think you can use your phone for HonorLock. I know you can't use your phone for Lapster. I know they were looking at creating an app that would allow them to. I don't know that they're at that capability yet, but they're going to need some sort of laptop or desktop. They're going to need access to some internet. And that's the unfortunate side effect though of teaching an online science class and trying to have those things. So in this quarter, if you're trying to limit those issues, then you're going to need to look at, okay, I'm not going to have a proctor. I'm going to create tests that maybe allow them not to have a proctor, and then I'm going to time them so that they can use their notes, they can use whatever they want, but it's timed so that, you can create that rigor around those tests that you want. Or you could go essay. It's going to require more grading, but you could do essay. You could do problem-based stuff. There's a variety of things you could do that wouldn't require you to lean on the internet the width, the broadband width of the internet, the download speeds as much. If you're not using HonorLock or a virtual lab, you can create other activities to do that for sure. Before, I know it's already, I know it's 11 about, but before we kind of get off here, I wanted to show you one last one because this was fall of 2013. Holy cow, my daughter's 7 now, so that's kind of makes me sad there. But I wanted to show you a difference. So this has been one of the first years I did this online, and just to give you an idea of what everything looked like. The module still had a welcome page, but you can see it's far more bare bones. There's not headings, there's not communication, and these worked well. Okay, these worked fine. We had great success in our online classes then. You can see there's still a welcome module. You can see the modules down here are organized by content, and they matched our textbook at the time because the first couple chapters were science and chemistry for Biology 160. You can see I have an instructions, start here, textbook, learning objectives, lectures, and assignments, and study tools. So this was a more bare bones version of what we did. Again, this was fall of 2013. I think this would have been maybe the second or third quarter we taught this class completely online. The other part is you can see there's discussions and quizzes and different stuff down here. So there's a variety of ways to organize your course. I think the key thing to walk away with when looking at sciences is figure out the labs. What are you going to do to do labs for them? Considering the tech as well as what you want in terms of that experience. What are you going to do for assessments? And then honestly, the most important part is not those two. It's how are you going to design something that's easy for them to navigate? Because if you make it easy for them to navigate, the learning becomes way easier. And I think that's the biggest thing to walk away from is try not to get caught up in the overwhelming part of the labs and the tests. And initially, how do I design a course that's just easy for them to navigate? And then you do your best this quarter on labs and assessments, understanding that not every quarter is perfect, that not every course is perfect, that not every learning experience is perfect, and that these students are still going to be fine. If they don't cover one piece of content, they're still going to be fine. They're still going to be successful if they continue to work hard. Student success long-term has far more to do with the behaviors they build than the content we give them. And I think that's a tough thing to grapple with because it makes us a little less important in some ways, but I think it's the most productive way to look at what we're dealing with right now.
Lucas, thank you so much. And I'm so glad that we are recording this. And I did want to say that there's some great stuff happening in the chat. Joseph is writing, your perspective on this whole challenge is extremely helpful. Thank you. And lots of thank yous coming in. So I did want to say that Lucas, great active chat this morning, really grateful for that. So Lucas and I will be going through that and answering questions follow up. One thing I have been trying to wrap my mind around, it's all a little bit overwhelming, is how to make sure that everybody who wants access to a discipline-specific group can get it, and then also when it's good to kind of come back together as almost like kind of under one big umbrella of STEM. And I think it's one thing I've been trying to wrap my mind around. So the state board is researching what it would take to purchase a system level Labster license, but I think there are some serious concerns around the accessibility issues. Like as a state agency, we just legitimately cannot purchase something that isn't accessible. So I know that our director of e-learning and one of our policy associates are investigating this. I think they also were curious to see if this is something that faculty would want. So again, like I think this feels like a very emergent space, and it's not quite. I'm just not quite sure how to proceed. So I know that with more information will come clarity. So I'm just trying to be patient with that because my modus operandi is to just make it happen really fast. Another thing that I've been trying to figure out is I just built a survey, and I will fix the survey so that it's a little more specific. So thanks for the feedback on that. But all I really need is your name and your email and just what group or groups you'd be most interested in partnering with, so I can start sending out information about that. So the microbiology group is meeting this afternoon. And I'm hoping that we can talk a little bit about what things are doing, what things people are doing, so people can just share briefly, like, here's what I'm working on. I know Katrina Fuller sent me an email saying that she has all of her classes ready to go and uploaded into the Canvas Commons. So I know she's going to share that today. And I also was going to ask her if she would do another Lifeboat strategy session, because I think it's helpful to see what people are doing in their courses. And I'm sorry, I'm just like so full of information right now. Um, and
Hey, Jen,
yeah, go ahead,
I
Lucas.
just want to
Sorry.
say, if you teach actually any online class, but if you teach micro online, or you're having to teach micro online,
Uh-oh, Lucas, I think we lost you.
get access to Katrina's courses, I suggest you do, because um, she's done amazing stuff, and it would be super beneficial for most everyone. Her and I oftentimes share courses, and then we add to them and then share them back as we teach with them. And so we've created a lot of good courses by collaborating together. But she does amazing work. So if you have a chance to see what Katrina Fuller does, she does an amazing job, especially with online micro, which was probably one of the toughest. It's got to be one of the tougher online classes to teach.
Lucas, thank you so much. You cut out just a smidgen, but what I heard you say is that it would be a good idea to have another Lifeboat strategy sessions with Katrina, just so
Yeah.
she can kind of show people her courses the way you did. Also, chemistry folks, I know that I've got a list of folks who are interested in a chemistry group, and I think my only concern was scheduling. And so I was hoping that um, if people might be wanting to meet this week. I was kind of thinking maybe we could meet on Thursday. So chemistry folks, everybody make sure that you fill out that survey so I can start to kind of get listservs going and just get things on the calendar, because I know time is of the essence. So sorry for all the rambling. It's just complicated to try to community organize this many groups. And I've never done it before. So so thanks for your patience with me. Lucas, I wanted to say thank you so much for being willing to share today. Like many people, I'm so grateful to you for sharing with us your classes and your expertise, and also being willing to answer questions. And yeah, I'm just so grateful. You're an amazing instructor. Thank you.
Well, I'm glad to be here, and we have a lot of really, as you always say, amazing teachers around this whole system. So we'll all get through this together, and I think that's the biggest thing, is just help each other out. Understand that nothing's going to be perfect, and it's going to be we'll all be fine come June, and the students will be okay if we just kind of work together and get us through it.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. We will get through this together. There are so many amazing people. And Lucas, like you said, there's 68 amazing brains. Let's get them all together and see what we can do together. And just really quickly, so for those of you who are filling out the survey, I built it really quickly just a few minutes ago, because I was like, well, I've got everybody in the room. So just if you could just write down what group you'd like to be put in communication with, that would be awesome. And I will go back and change the survey based on what folks said. And also, I really hope that people might come and join the microbiology faculty this afternoon. And Rick, I see a question about math. I think Laura Schuler and Bill Moore are organizing a math group. So if people write down math, I will put you in touch with them. And Joseph Cates Carney wrote, "It'll all be okay in the end. If it isn't okay, it's not the end." Love it. All right. Thanks, everybody. And I hope everyone has a really beautiful day. And I'll see most of you, or a lot of you, a little bit later. And I'll definitely see everybody on the email. I'm going to stop recording, but Lucas and I can hang out for a while.